This is truly a wonderful occasion to be here in this historic building, Colored School Number 1, for African Americans after first enrolling their children into Baltimore City Public Schools on July 10th, 1867. Black children were able to enroll in public schools for the first time and then consecrated this building as Colored School Number 1. So why don't y'all give it up for the ancestors? Yes. So I'm happy to be here. You heard a lot. This is my first time watching this film. You heard a lot about culture and stories and narratives. And so I want to submit to you that the Black Butterfly in many ways is a counter-narrative. It's a counter-narrative that hopes to explain and add layers to what you've just heard. And what we've, again, heard a lot about culture, history, narratives. So now I want to explain more about systems and spaces. Systems and spaces. And hopefully when you get through with this, we'll have a full and complete picture of the work that is before us. So let's jump right in and get started with the Black Butterfly and the complete transformation of Baltimore City. So I want to start with this quote right here by Liz Oglu. She's an architect. She says, "Space has often been used in this country as a system of control and exclusion. Space has been intimately connected to racialized harm. So it must be part of the conversation on how we heal." So I want to start with this space. Before Baltimore became a city in the year 1760, going way back in time. Watch out. And so when you go back, African Americans, they helped build this mansion for the slave masters. Right here, you see their names, Charles Carroll the Barrister. There were multiple Charles Carrolls, including one who signed the Declaration of Independence. This is not him, this is Charles Carroll the Barrister and his wife, Margaret Tillman. African Americans built this beautiful place. I've been in it. It's an amazing historical relic, still exists, still stands in Baltimore. You should go visit it. This is part of our heritage that we should all be learning. We should all be teaching our children this history, this plantation that still exists in this city. But we see where they lived. I want to encourage you to ask the question, where did the enslaved people live? What type of housing do you think they lived in? Do you think it had the beautiful brick, large edifice? What kind of housing y'all think they lived in? Log cabin, wood. What else? If this is on the top of the hill, where do you think the enslaved live? Down at the bottom. So we see right here in the beginning, as the advent of colonization in the colonial period, as this is going on, we already see how there's a domination of space. Racism in America is not just about the domination of people, but the domination of space and place. But I got to move on. We got to keep it moving. Because you also had spaces of liberation, including this beautiful church built by enslaved and free African Americans at nighttime. Can you imagine building a building at night? The craftsmanship, the skilled ingenuity that had to be deeply embedded in those folks to build this beautiful edifice. And legend has it, I believe I've seen it, down in the bowels of this building, there are tunnels associated with the Underground Railroad. So just like there are spaces of domination, there are also spaces of liberation. And this too is part of our heritage. And so is this. You may have seen in Sunday's paper 2 Sundays ago in the Sun, this article by Amy Davis, where it outlines Baltimore's history, the heritage of slave trading. In Baltimore City, a lot of it happening along Pratt Street, right over there. And what do we see here? Slave jails and slave pens. where the enslaved were taken before they were put on the boat down at the harbor and shipped to cities like New Orleans, Louisiana. And according to the Reginald Lewis Museum, there's a plaque that says 30,000 African Americans were put on boats and shipped to the Deep South because after 1800, there was a cash crop that became the king. Anybody know what crop that was? That's right, cotton production went through the roof because there was an invention. Anybody know that invention? But bonus, do you know who invented it? Eli. So we got some historically astute people in the room. So cotton production goes through the roof. More labor is needed, and much of that labor, so black folks, you may have some cousins and aunts and uncles and descendants and folks that are in the Deep South related to you that were shipped from Baltimore City. And this takes place all the way up until the Civil War. And there were manifests of the names, the ages, the ships they were placed on. We have the historical records. That is all still with us. You can read more about that in Ralph Clayton's book, The Cash for Blood. You can read more about that in his book. But I got to move on because Baltimore, my goodness, did anybody know that Baltimore was the place of the first bloodshed of the Civil War? You see, you can't tell America's history without coming through Baltimore. You can't tell it, it's impossible. We all know where the first fighting of the Civil War began, right? It began in South Carolina. What was the name of the fort? Fort Sumter, South Carolina. But nobody died in the fighting. The first bloodshed happened a week later. Soldiers marching on Pratt Street. Union soldiers are going to put down that old Confederate rebellion. And Confederate loving Baltimore said, no, you don't. You're not going to go mess with my cousin. And this fighting broke out. They called the Pratt Street Riot. Baltimore. But I got to move on because we got to keep on going. What I love is that black people, I want you to know, we joined the Union Army, some of us as nurses, as spies, as soldiers, fighting, and eventually defeating the old slave master. You ought to put your hands together for that. We won. We whooped that old slave master. Yes, we did. We burned plantations down to the ground. Woo! Overcoming 246 years of slavery on this soil, along with white allies, along with white soldiers in the Union Army, and along with white abolitionists. That was the greatest moment in American history. Why aren't we celebrating that? Why don't we have marches and parades celebrating the absolute greatest moment in African American history when we came together and whooped those Confederates? But we know they did not accept that loss, and they're still trying to bring it back today. But black people were fighting and pushing for equality in Baltimore. You had the four Stewart sisters fighting for transit equity on a steamboat. You had the Mutual Brotherhood of Liberty fighting for education, equality, and equity when Baltimore children were first enrolled in Baltimore schools, 1884 and in the late 1800s. But Baltimore, now we got to talk about these systems because Baltimore becomes the first city in America to pass a residential racial zoning law. New York Times covers it. You can download this article and read it. In fact, it should be required reading. K through 12, public and private schools. If you don't read this, you don't know how Baltimore became the city that it is. This is talking about it in real time. The newspaper is covering it. And it was that man in the middle. Somebody say the man in the middle. Come on, y'all. Somebody say the man in the middle. It's always the man in the middle. See, that was the Baltimore mayor, John Barry Mahul. John Barry Mahul, he was the mayor. That man up in the far left, that was council member Samuel L. West. It was his ordinance. So now we're talking about law, policy, systems coming into play. Slavery was a system. Slave trading was a system, education, transportation. Now you have the city council and the mayor passing this law. And this was such a devious law, it prevented Negroes, black people known as Negroes back then, from moving into blocks now totally inhabited by white people, but does not allow them to have churches or places of amusement. So this segregated not just where black people could live, but where black people could worship. Where black people could have parks and amusement and swimming pools. Swimming pools were racially segregated, y'all. Swimming pools. Where the babies played, where the children could swim. Segregation by law. Got to move on. Then in 1937, the federal government gets involved. It creates this residential security map system. This weaponizes racial segregation. And it said to green and blue communities, you can have great interest rates and a good amount of capital for your home or for your small business. It said to red and yellow and especially red communities, you guys are going to be out of luck. Barely can get a loan. You can barely get a loan for your business, barely get a loan for your home. What's the impact of that? Because you may say, Dr. Brown, that was a long time ago. What does this data right here from Zillow show? It shows that the homes in red colored communities from 1997 to 2017 is still well below the values of homes in yellow, green, and blue communities. So the damage is still with us. Public housing. I know you may not be able to see it all that well, but where is public housing in Baltimore City? Where was it placed by another system, the Housing Authority of Baltimore City? Where was public housing placed? Do y'all see any public housing up in Mount Washington, Roland Park, Guilford, Homeland? Do y'all see any public housing up there? Anybody seen it? If y'all find public housing up in those communities, somebody come please tell me. No, it wasn't placed there. It was placed in those darker gray communities. The legend says, the darker the gray, the more African Americans live there. Even in the age of desegregation, the smaller, flatter, scatter sites were being built by Public Housing Authority. And where was the yellow dots? Where were those placed? Do y'all see the yellow dots up in Mount Washington, Roland Park, Guilford, Homeland, Laurelville? Do y'all see any scatter sites in the age of desegregation, 1980? No, you don't. Space, the domination of space. Public housing was intentionally, maliciously concentrated into black neighborhoods. This was devious. This was malicious. This was intentional. Urban renewal. I don't even have time to go through all this, but suffice it to say, our PWIs, predominantly white institutions, they were involved. Thousands of households. And how big were families back in the 50s and 60s? Somebody, anybody remember how big families were back then? We talk about 2, 3 people per household? Nobody, more like what? 6, 7. Ooh, how many children, what? Okay. So think about how many people lived in each of those households. And this is the center of the city. So many, and disproportionately impacting African Americans in Baltimore. The Highway to Nowhere displaced 965 households. I-83, Jones Falls Parkway, 260 households. 16,000 households were uprooted and displaced. Systems. There used to be an agency in Baltimore called the Baltimore Urban Renewal and Housing Agency, BURHA. Uprooting, a super agency, uprooting and displacing so many African Americans. And you can more or less see the evidence from this aerial shot in 1959. There's the harbor, so close to where we are. This is central Baltimore. And I want you to look at the difference roughly 50 years later. Do you see how big a lot of these shadows? Much more commercial, much more, many more businesses. You see Jones Falls Parkway, that wasn't there. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. That wasn't there. Go back to 1959. See how those roads weren't there? And then go forward. Look at US 40. Look at how big, how that gutted West Baltimore, cut it in two. Look at how a road named after Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. segregated downtown from West Baltimore. They named a road that enforced segregation after the prophet of desegregation. Look at how it cut and bounded downtown from West Baltimore. The mass uprooting of people. This is the devastation of urban renewal, highways cutting through black neighborhoods. And this is where we are today. A Category 5 hyper-segregated city. I was looking at this very map in 2015 when I said, man, the pattern of where black people live looks like a butterfly. And I said, I'm going to call it the black butterfly. So this is where that came from. A racial dot map by Dustin Cable. He was at the University of Virginia at the time. So Baltimore has destroyed and defunded black neighborhoods. So I'm saying beyond culture, narratives, history of people, this is what has happened to space. The domination of space. And this is what I write about in my book, how Baltimore, and indeed America, has destroyed black neighborhoods, uprooting black people over and over and over and over and over again. And how will any community have stability and thrive when it's being uprooted and destroyed repeatedly? No community, no race, no people could survive this type of repeated uprooting, tearing down, and it took African American from a state of more solidarity. This is the paradox. Even with slavery, there was more solidarity. If you go back than there is today, because all of this uprooting, Baltimore took a communal people and destroyed their communities. Think about the damage that causes. Next. Here's a map of how many banks are in each community statistical area. In the black butterfly, many communities there are 17 of them that have no bank. Look at the banks that are in the white L compared to the black butterfly. So these communities are not only uprooted, but these communities are economically starved of capital. You all tell me, this is a very intelligent audience, what happens to a community when it's starved of capital year after year, decade after decade? How can any community survive without capital in a capitalist society? So we must build the abolition democracy. This is an imperative. This is how we must complete the transformation of Baltimore City. And you see here in my sister colleague's book, the way to do this is to share resources with historically defunded communities. Build them up and make sure that the people have agency, voice in how their communities are developed. This is how we do this. Now, abolition democracy, Dr. Du Bois, the greatest social scientist of all time, he wrote in 1935 in this book that the abolition of slavery didn't just mean getting rid of chattel slavery and the legal ownership of people. He said, no. Comprehensive abolition had to be more than that. And he says here that it meant the uplift of the formerly enslaved, incorporating them into society, and they must have civil rights as a citizen. They must have political rights like every other citizen of the United States. Is that a reality today? So if that's not a reality, we have not completed the work of creating the abolition democracy. And that's a term that he created. So the question before us, before these great institutions that we're in today, how does Baltimore City complete the transformation from a slavery-loving municipality to a mature abolition democracy? That's the question. We went part of the way. We got rid of chattel slavery, but then we destroyed and defunded black neighborhoods. We took one step forward and then 2 steps back. And this is what keeps Baltimore from being great. This is what keeps Baltimore from being thriving and allowing us to have a narrative of a city on the rise that we can all be truly proud of. Only a city, only a nation that emerges from the legacy of slavery and the domination of space and matures into an abolition democracy can create a society where all people have dignity, life, and can pursue happiness in whatever capacity our Creator has given us. This is the awesome challenge and task before us. And how do we do it? There are all kinds of solutions. Community land trust, cooperatives, basic income, guaranteed income, a massive construction workforce program for young people to rebuild this city. There's so many solutions. Black neighborhood reparations to repair the damage. There are things that we can do. There are things we must do to become the abolition democracy we are meant to be. And I want to leave you with this. I'm inspired because I see organizations such as these naming themselves after the black butterfly as a concept and doing incredible work to boost and build the black small business infrastructure, which is right here, the Black Butterfly Network and the Black Butterfly Exchange. I see an urban farming program helping urban farmers build capacity so that we can boost food security, increase nutrition quality. I see the Family League of Baltimore using the work that we've done for them with the community health needs assessment at Morgan State to basically outline their transformation plan for 2024. I am inspired by the work that has happened. I'm inspired by what is happening here at the Peel Center to uplift this beautiful history. I'm inspired by the Baltimore National Heritage Area that says we want to uplift Baltimore's real, true legacy, the good and the bad. The good and the bad, because if we're honest with ourselves, that's the only way, like Champa said in the movie, that's the only way we can truly grow and change. Thank you.